If there's a role that's present in both League and Dota, but I feel is completely different in both games, it's got to be the hard carry position, otherwise known as ADC. The carry role is pretty clearly defined. You're the team's primary damage source, and the one that your teammates will look to when they need to see some big numbers. If the mid laner needs ego, what does the hard carry need? My answer, discernment. To play the carry role well, your decision-making skills come before all else, and here's why. As a carry, your real job is simple. Press right click. Right click on the creeps and minions when they're low HP enough to secure the gold. Right click on the turrets and towers to take map control. Right click on the enemy heroes to delete them from the game. Right click away from people who might kill you, and then right click on everything else in between. You're the damage bot. A straightforward role on paper, but when you take a closer look, there's a lot of nuance to this position, which I believe makes it the hardest role in the game. No pun intended. The first big thing is that everyone knows you're the carry. That means there's a big target mark on your back, so expect to play like that the whole game. Everyone knows that you're a ticking time bomb, so be prepared to get hunted relentlessly throughout the match. And this is where your decision-making skills come in. Your decisions of when to farm, when to fight, what items to buy, and when to buy them as a carry can completely affect the game. And that's about it for similarities. Carrying in Dota and carrying in League can feel the same, but they're two completely different experiences. The first major difference is in viable hero choices. If you look at the most popular heroes most commonly played in the carry position in Dota, you'll notice that most of them are melee. In fact, among the top 10 heroes commonly played in the hard carry position, only one of them is ranged, Drow Ranger. But then you look at League and see that the bot lane roster is almost entirely ranged champions. So why are melee carries the norm in Dota whereas a rarity in League? Quite a few reasons. Every League champ may have a passive, but melee heroes in Dota have an innate passive that the game never actually tells you about. Every melee hero has a 50-50 chance to negate 16 flat damage every time they're hit. This means that melee heroes innately have a higher effective HP and won't get bullied out of lane, or at least not as easily. Another difference is a mechanic that I'm surprised I never actually mentioned before in any of my League and Dota comparison videos, is the way stats work in both games. League uses a fairly simple system when it comes to stats. Let's say you buy Kraken Slayer, a go-to item for many ADCs. This item gives you attack damage, or AD, attack speed, and increased critical hit chance for your autos, on top of the ramping attack passive. This means that every third attack with a Kraken Slayer deals bonus damage scaling with your AD, and this ramps up against targets you hit repeatedly. And while you can buy items that give damage, attack speed, and crit chance, you can also buy attribute items. Unlike in League, where every hero gets specific growth to their stats every level, Dota heroes' base stats and growth are governed by their attributes, namely their strength, agility, and intelligence stats. In Dota, you gain attributes every level. You gain agility, which gives you attack speed and armor, strength, which gives you max HP and HP regen, and intelligence, which gives you max mana, which is a resource that everyone has in Dota, mana regen, and magic resistance. And every hero in Dota has a primary attribute, which means they gain damage in addition to what these stats give if they match said hero's attribute. If you're an agility hero and you buy an item that gives you 10 agility, not only do you get 10 attack speed and 1.5 armor, but you also get 10 base damage. This mechanic means that carries don't have to sacrifice tankiness when building damage items. While items that purely exist to increase DPS are still a thing in Dota, like Monkey King Bar, Daedalus, and of course Divine Rapier, there are items like Sanjin Yasha and Harpoon which help boost DPS while also keeping you alive in a fight, and these items are commonly built on melee carries. It means that strength carries can build items that improve their durability without sacrificing damage, or that agility carries can build armor, attack speed, and damage by building towards a single stat, making these insanely efficient in terms of gold. These attribute items allow melee carries who are strength, agility, and universal, meaning pretty much all of them, to build stats to increase their DPS and effective HP at the same time. But attributes aren't the whole story. There are also simply more active items. See, one of the major differences between League and Dota is the inclusion of items with a specific active. I don't know what it is with League, but I can build 4 to 5 active items in Dota no problem, but even I'll forget to use my Arm Guard Azonias. Anyway, let's take a look at Diffusal Blade as an example. It's a very popular item on melee agility carries like Phantom Lancer and Slark because it gives you 15 agility and 10 intelligence. From just these two lines of stats, it means you're getting 120 mana, 0.5 mana regeneration, and 1% base magic resistance, 15 attack speed, and 2.5 base armor, and 15 attack damage for agility heroes. Those are pretty alright stats, but then you realize it comes with a passive component. Mana Break. This means that whoever buys this item will diminish 40 mana from the target with every auto attack, and deal that mana burned back as damage. So not only are you getting 15 attack speed on top of 15 damage as an agility hero, but you're also getting the mana burn effect and extra damage to targets with mana to burn. This is all on top of an active component that lets you slow a target for 4 seconds, and this isn't some measly 30% slow that you barely feel the effects of. You slow them down by 100%, rendering them completely immobile as it gradually reduces the gravity of the slow over said 4 seconds. This item allows melee agility carries to stay on top of a target so they can wail on them with auto attacks. This is in stark contrast to most ADC items in League, which only really give you some mixture of attack damage, attack speed, and crit chance. And ADC items mainly have passive effects, with active effects being very few and far between. And you can't talk about carry items without talking about Black King Bar, an item in Dota which gives any hero who uses it an Olaf ult for a short time. And if you've ever fought a good Olaf, you'd know that any amount of CC immunity feels like an eternity. And this is where discernment comes in. Your item choices as a carry will affect not just yourself, but your whole team as well. Choosing a defensive item like building a 4-staff on Drow or foregoing Zerks for Mercs as Jinx may hurt your damage output early on, but they may mean you get to live longer in a fight, and you can't deal damage if you're not staying alive long enough to do any. And the last reason melee carries are viable in Dota is the presence of turn rate. See, turn rate slows the game down at a micro level as it makes Dota heroes feel a bit clunkier to control than League champions. Dota heroes have to take a few fractions of a second to turn before moving forward in a certain direction. This means that ranged heroes like Drow Ranger can cover far less distance if you were to try and weave in auto attacks while running away. It's fine when you're weaving them in as you run forward, but not when kiting back because of the turn rate. And this is what allows melee carries in Dota to stand toe-to-toe with ranged ones, while to make a melee carry work in League, you need to have a kit that's completely overloaded. But this lack of turn rate is also what gives League ADCs who play auto attackers like Kog'Maw and Jinx some form of meaningful skill expression through high APM. The next difference I want to talk about is lane structure. Dota's laning stage for carries is kinda weird because it's not necessarily a contest of who has the better carry support duo. As a carry, you typically face the enemy offlaner and the soft support. This can be a bit problematic as traditionally carries are weak in lane but get stronger after acquiring levels and items, and many offlaners are lane bullies like Timbersaw, Axe, Darkseer, and Beastmaster who all have some way of pressuring you and preventing you from freely farming. Combine this with a position 4, which is usually a hero that provides lockdown, damage, or both, like Lion, Shadow Shaman, or Earth Spirit, and you're in for a rough laning stage. This is where your support comes in to block the enemy pull camp, stack and pull the small camp, and trade effectively with your lane opponent. In League, however, the bot lane matchup is fairly straightforward. Whoever gets more love from their jungler will win. But if the jungler's out of the equation, bot lane is a coordination check. It's the only lane in the game which has 2 players instead of 1, meaning that you have to account for a whole nother variable. Assuming that all players are of equal skill level, then whoever wins bot lane becomes a matter of who is better at dodging and hitting skill shots, using summoner spells, coordinating engagement and disengagement with the enemy, and most importantly, wave management, which is completely different in both games. In Dota, as a carry, you want your wave to be as close to your tower as possible without being directly under it. This means that your enemies have to be very respectful when it comes to harassing you. It means they can't get over aggressive and go for a kill, and if they make a mistake, there's a lot of room to run them down. You also get a nice little buff that gives you bonus armor and HP regen whenever you're under your tower. Meanwhile, seemingly the opposite is true for League. For a lot of carries, particularly Caitlyn, Ashe, and Varus, you want to be hitting the minions as soon as you arrive in lane to hit your level 2 power spike faster. You also want to shove the enemy under their turret and keep them there for the most part. And that's because shoving the lane gives you more options, and as a carry, you need to be able to discern which of those options is best. Not only does the turret mess with the enemy's last hitting, but many League champs who are present in the bot lane have their own way of harassing from a distance. Kate and Lux, for example, can keep pressuring with their range even if their enemy is safely under their turret. League also encourages you to push early on because of turret planing. Before 14 minutes, you can take plating by dealing a certain amount of damage to an enemy turret, which gives you and any nearby teammate bonus gold. By shoving the wave into the enemy turret, you can also open up a window to back and get some items. Coming back to lane with a Nude Quiver feels like such a huge quality of life improvement after having nothing but a Doran's Blade. And perhaps the most important option, First Drake. The Drake is a neutral objective that spawns at minute 5 in every league match, and every 5 minutes after the first one is killed. By killing Drake, you're giving your team free stats. The first team to kill 4 Drakes gets the Dragon Soul, which is a buff that changes every match, and this can be a critical advantage in a close game. Depending on what the Dragon Soul for that game is, you can get some pretty crazy effects like a burst of damage on your attacks and spells, or a permanent shield, just to name a few. Naturally, this means that getting the first Drake is important because not only is it free stats, but it's also free stats during a phase of the game where items are still pretty scarce. While the actual numbers may seem low, in a game like League where every little bit counts, you can't just sleep on 5% AD and AP from First Drake. Why am I mentioning this? Because the Dragon Pit is located right next to the bot lane. So if you've shoved the enemy into their turret, they either have to give up all that juicy golden XP from the minion wave or the First Drake, assuming your jungler is in position to take DR. And speaking of junglers, the presence of the jungler is another huge difference between playing carry in Dota and League. Dota players don't normally say carry, mid laner, or off laner and instead say pos 1, 2, 3, etc. because the roles are more defined by how much farm they get rather than where they're sent to during the laning stage. And being the position 1, the carry role has the lion's share, no not you, of the resources. That means they get to farm everything the light touches, and I really do mean that. They should only really be farming in places that they control, either through towers or wards, unless you're Eternal Envy, who liked taking risky farms so much that he became a day trader. Meanwhile, trying to do the same in League and farming your own jungle while your jungler isn't ganking is a quick way to get an account ban. Funneling all of your resources into your carry is a real thing in Dota. Meanwhile, Riot has kind of changed League to make funneling less rewarding to the team as a whole through nerfing jungle XP and making camps harder to kill without a jungle pet. Another big difference is the presence of the APC. This is what happens when League players take a damage dealing mage and shoves them into the bot lane. Up until recently, magic damage carries were not a thing in Dota. Then Muerta, a right-click carry that can deal magic damage with her attacks, got released. And then Dota players realized she's better as a support. I guess some things never change. Dota's design philosophy for magic damage is that they're meant to be strong early on but fall off later once more items and stats are in the mix. There are some exceptions though, such as Lina, who just has an absurd amount of spell amp, as well as Zeus, who deals % health damage with his spells. But for the most part, Dota mages don't scale with items. After all, there's only really one item that improves spell damage: Kaya. That's why most spellcasters in Dota are relegated to the support role and instead build utility items like Glimmer Cape and Force Staff. Thanks to Riot's design philosophy though, League's magic damage dealers are spoiled for choice in terms of what they can build, especially in Season 14. That, combined with a lack of items like Dota's Pipe of Insight and BKB, makes mages a viable pick if you're looking for a sustained source of damage. Some examples include Karthus, Ziggs, Seraphine, and Veigar. AP bot laners are an actual thing in League because 1, they're actually allowed to scale through AP items, and 2, the game automatically detects whether you have more AP or AD and uses this to calculate damage to structures, so you're not necessarily sacrificing tower damage by picking a mage. This actually allows for more dynamic team compositions, letting your other lanes stack physical damage dealers like Tryndamere and Yasuo while you're playing as a magic damage dealer at bot. But then, Dota also has a wider variety of carry archetypes. All of League's ADCs are covered under the Marksman class, which really means ranged right-clicker. While Riot has done a good job of making each marksman feel unique, they still boil down to the formula of ranged right-clicker, but blank. Ashe is a ranged right-clicker, but with more crowd control. Tristana is a ranged right-clicker, but she destroys your turn in 5 seconds, and Smolder is a ranged right-clicker, but overloaded as all hell. And because of that, counterplay is pretty simple for the most part. Just apply Fed Rengar to the enemy ADC and delete them from the game. And as a result, some games you don't get a lot of agency as an ADC. If their assassins are hunting you down, you either have to play incredibly safe or have a pocket support who just exists to peel for you. But Dota's carries are entirely different archetypes on their own. In the 1 position, there are your one-man frontlines that deal massive damage like Sven and Bristleback. There are also illusion carries like Phantom Lancer and Terrorblade who can create more of themselves and take over games against lineups without an answer to them. There are assassins like Riki and Phantom Assassin who are incredibly mobile and have the slipperiness aggressiveness to hunt squishies and take them out of the fight. And then you get fighters that are designed to win 1v1 scenarios like Jug and Monkey King, who just has to be in every MOBA. And then of course, there's the marksmen, like Drow Ranger, Muerta, and Medusa. And you need discernment as a carry because you need to be able to draft well too. And I don't mean just counter-picking the enemy laner. I mean being able to identify your team's win conditions and timings just from the draft and being able to play around them. For example, if your team has an up-tempo draft that wants to end early, then you should pick something that falls into this timing, like Ezreal and Draven for League or Luna for Dota. If you have a team that seems to want to play defensively for the early game, you're in a better position to pick a hyper carry like Vayne or Spectre. And perhaps the biggest difference between the two games is that in Dota, you're the hard carry, but anyone can carry in League. Your top laner or mid laner might have a strong laning stage and snowball to become a threat. 1v9 champs like Master Yi, Sylas, and Gwen exist in other roles besides ADC to carry games on their own. I've had games where, yeah, I'm farmed as ADC, but I dealt the lowest damage on my team simply because everyone else popped off. And with how different Dota and League are as games, there are probably a ton more differences to talk about in terms of the carry role that I'm sure to have missed in creating this video. If you feel like I should have talked about something, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But if you liked the video, found a joke funny, or got some good insight from it, please let me know by hitting that like button, making a comment down below, and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I'll be doing a few more videos this month talking about the support, jungler, and top/off laner roles in both games, so don't miss out on those. And that's all for now. Ace out.